principio fundamental que nos identifica a la Alianza Global. De Indonesia, Amán, con su historia en Asia, en la cuenca del Congo, los 8 países de África, que nos conecta con Repaliac, la cuenca amazónica, en todo Sudamérica nos conecta, y todo Brasil, Apibi, y Mesoamérica y el Caribe. Casi 980, mis hermanos como Kimaren, la doctora Mirna ha mencionado el marco de derechos, la justicia, nos hace crear en esta línea de los principios que la Alianza Global trabaja. COP26, 1.7 billones para comunidades de pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales. ¿Es suficiente? No. ¿Es justo? No. Pero vamos a aplaudir que es una iniciativa, es un reconocimiento a ese caminar, a esa lucha. Desde allá, la Alianza Global ha hecho la propuesta en una comunidad donde se reunió con sabedores, con la guayusa, con la espiritualidad, Shah, el saludo, Día, Shandia, el nuevo amanecer, el nuevo encuentro para las finanzas climáticas, para transformar, para transparentar la financiera global, los pledges. ¿Por qué? No porque Juanca o los liderazgos dijeron, no, por justicia. Y había estudios. Voy a dieron la alarma. 1%, no, 2%. ¿Quién da más? ¿Cuánto llega más a los territorios? En verdad me preocupé y nos preocupamos. Shandia hace ese camino desde la COP26 y la COP27 se lanza una plataforma para equilibrar a esos ecosistemas que han sido creados. Con alianzas en los territorios, con la confianza que da el pueblo a nuestros, los brasileños dicen parceros, a nuestros socios, porque hay hermandad, se crea confianza. Pero muchas de esas confianzas son manipuladas y tergiversadas y causa mucho dolor. Multilaterales, bilaterales, todos hemos invitado a la plataforma de alto nivel Shandia, liderado por la Alianza Global de Bosques Tropicales. Shandia, para resumir, conecta, visibiliza, transforma ese diálogo en la transparencia y en la solidaridad. ¿Por qué estamos acá en esta COP? ¿Es una COP financiera? Sí. ¿Dónde se desarrolla esta COP? Sí. ¿Hay contextos, soluciones basadas en la naturaleza? Sí. ¿Ecosistemas? Sí. ¿Biodiversidad? Emprendimientos, lucha de derechos en la parte central. Y hemos invitado a nuestros socios, a nuestros hermanos, en estas líneas. Equidad justa. Somos socios, somos jugar en la cuestión de iguales de condiciones. Si me preguntan a mí, ¿qué más de principio es para Shandia? Nosotros somos donadores de la vida, contribuyentes en este proceso con todos esos recursos que tenemos y que no estamos ahí parados día a día, y por eso nos solidarizamos. La línea ha hecho un reporte y hemos tenido una grande aceptación porque no es territoriales. Van a tener sus socios territoriales desde las comunidades, sí. Desde las regionales, sí, pero son los mecanismos propios de las organizaciones que fortalecen la autodeterminación en el marco de la Declaración Universal de los Derechos de los Pueblos Indígenas. Todos son bienvenidos para aportar, para crecer juntos y colaborar. También la crítica es bienvenida. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Not sure. Yeah, this is on. So if you haven't seen the Shandia report yet, I really encourage you to do so, because it's a very inspiring report, I think, full of very good ideas that we can all take further in our constituencies. Our next speaker is Nonette Royo, who is the Executive Director of the International Land Tenure Facility, often referred to as the Tenure Facility. The Tenure Facility is, well, it's a partly Indigenous governed facility, but it also has other experts on the board. But hopefully it's not more than one Indigenous person on the board, right? So many Indigenous people on the board. Just wanted to make sure of that. But it also serves as an intermediary that allocates funds for Indigenous and local community organizations around the world. So, Nonette, what can you tell us about the challenges and also the opportunities and the progress that you've made since the Tenure Facility was established in 2017?
Thank you, Hege. Good afternoon, everyone. I have 3 words to share. Trust, land right, and action. Need to be implemented. So we come in with larger funds that are longer term and more flexible, although that we are working really hard on because we are receiving bilateral funding. Right? So to be at the table, you have to prove that you are the one. And for Indigenous peoples, that is so hard. It's not just they're not seen because they're remote. They did not register to have an ID. And the places they go, their houses do not have walls, the walls that we have. It's the trees, it's the lake, the markers are different. So then it doesn't translate. So how do we make that translatable? And how do we do that in such a way that the government will say, oh yeah, okay, I know, it's you. You. So that process takes a long time. And that process involves a lot of trust too. In remembering, in connecting, in important, and that I think we all are doers of this. This is not unique, and this is not the Tenure Facility. This is all of us working on this. So that's the second point. And the third is action. There was never any one of us, never the Tenure Facility. Positive element, again, I like this to be positive because we have to. We have to hold hands. In the projections of 1.5, we're in trouble. We are. So we need to figure out ways to come together, work together, and figure this out. So action. There's momentum. Everyone here in the panel have said it. There's so much knowledge. There's so much interest. There's so much intent. There's so much vulnerability, and there's so much giving. Giving of lives, not just money. This is not about money. This is about relationships. This is about just going step by step, every step of the way, helping and pulling the other. You know, a relay, we've all done relays, it's fun. But run hard and pass it on. Don't hold on to it. Never hold on to it. Give it, give it, give it, give it. You know, put your logo if you want. You don't have to put your logo if you don't want. Or, you know, just work together. If it's an issue, take the logos away. Let's go for it. I think that's the Tenure Facility is trying very hard. And now this year, 2023, we moved $24 million. It's our mandate. We have to. If we don't, we go away. Right? That's what the Indigenous people said. Receive the big money that we cannot handle, distribute it to us, find a way. We've kind of tried very hard to do that, and many of us here can tell the story, but we're doing it. And let's all do it. No, different roles, different systems. Let's bundle it together. Let's do it. And there are many people here who will, I hope you can speak out. Yeah, Kawari and others, speak out when there's a time for it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nonette. I think that was very, very clear. Money for the bucks, so to say. Words for the bucks. Our last speaker on that panel today is Lindsay Allen, and Lindsay represents the philanthropic community in this space, and she's been a long-term advocate for Indigenous people's rights and to funding and finding ways of funding territories more directly. So what have you learned, and what's the opportunities and the challenges?
Yeah, thank you. It's daunting to go after this panel. So I'm honored to be here, and I appreciate the chance to talk about the experiences that we've had. I would start by saying, number one, we know that a lot more climate finance needs to move. Also, I'm going to talk about a bit is the role of territorial funds in moving climate finance and why we're investing heavily in that area. One is that not only do Indigenous, local community, Afro-descendant funds move the resources, but they move the resources in a really different way, because it's in a way that strengthens the integrity and the autonomy of those communities and networks. And that's something that's really important when we look at the need for climate finance to move in ways that really matter on the ground. Highlight a couple of experiences that we've had. One is it's important to talk about why territorial funds matter, and not just that they're vehicles of finance, but they're vehicles that strengthen Indigenous, local community, and Afro-descendant power. And what we've done as part of that is to move the resources, get the seed funding moving, allow the organizations to have the conversations they need to have in a networked and community-grounded way, and take that case to other donors to show that it's possible, it's not risky, it's a really wise investment. So that's one of the experiences that we've had. The other is, I would say, we have started with a very broad set of partners and now host a philanthropic and civil society collaborative called Forest People Climate. And this is really targeted, it does many things, but one of the things that it's really targeted at is encouraging high net worth donors and donors who might need more capacity building, who might not have connections with Indigenous networks and territorial funds, to make it easy for them to, that is already happening, so it doesn't feel like it's hard to understand, it doesn't feel like this is risky, it doesn't feel like we don't know what to do, so we're just going to invest in things that are right in front of us that we know those mechanisms don't reach the local level and they don't have the benefits that we need to see when we're talking about climate injustice. We also know that and this was commented on already, we know that the requirements for Indigenous organizations are a mismatch with the lived reality, and we need to fix that, right? So on one hand, bilateral institutions, governments, they have a responsibility to use taxpayer dollars well. That's one thing, but governments. So it's really, there's work that can be done to make it easier for money to be accessible and to make it to the not creating and taking people's time on becoming grant administrators and accountants, right? So that they can focus on the work that needs to be done. I don't think we've seen the level of progress that, well, I know, it's not that I think, I know for sure we have not seen the level of progress that we need to see on that. So part of what we need to do is continue having that conversation and question the rigid approaches that are stopping money that could otherwise go to really positive work. The last experience that I'll just highlight is really specifically related to Brazil, because we're at a COP. We're talking about the Brazil COP is coming in 2 years. We know that money can sometimes move in COPs. It's dumped in ways that are unbalanced, and then it goes away. Right? And it's a boom-bust cycle that's not helpful. We know that instruments like territorial funds can allow the money to come in and be more thoughtfully distributed and shared, and that those funds can play the role of meeting the requirements and supporting people's movements who are focusing on other things. In Brazil, we did an assessment to support, and this was with the NGO Cefras, to support donors in understanding the landscape of Indigenous, Afro-descendant, and local community funds that could be supported. Out of that, there was an assessment where 17 were the partnership of folks who have helped us build our capacity on this to understand how to support territorial funds and other.
Thank you so much. I think it's a very rich and complementary input from all of you. I'd now like to open the floor for questions and comments from the audience, but primarily questions. We still have we have half an hour exactly. So when you pose questions, I'd like you to say who you are, to raise up, so we can see you, to say who you are and which organization you represent. And please also let us know who you are directing your question to. And try to be brief so that you also allow space for other participants. And the organizers will send around the mics. I see there's a gentleman here on the front row.
Okay, thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. I am Basiru Issa. It is difficult for us to manage resources, but you are able to spend at least $10,000 for us to come and watch COP. That is, you are unable to give us a grant of $5,000, but you are able to give us to spend $10,000 to pollute the environment, because we have to take vehicles and take planes. You have to pay it to reach people in big hotels that we are not even used to. We have to take vehicles when we come here. You don't trust us. We appreciate you for that. Yes. Secondly, you say that you don't trust us, we cannot manage big money. But when it is time, you consult us. You call us, we come, we consult, we give you all the ideas. You give us the per diems, whereas your staffs are being paid salaries plus their per diems. You don't trust us. And that is good. We appreciate you for that. Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes, because you see, for example, they will recruit a finance officer, finance assistants, an account internal auditor, net auditor. Just to monitor resources going to indigenous people. You don't trust us. You need to trust us. We need to be trusted. You cannot be pretending that you want to help us and you don't trust us. Why are you helping us if you don't trust us? You need to trust us. And today, indigenous peoples of today, yes, for example, many of us, we have gone to school. And English Tadu. No donor will know where Tadu is found. I am the only one who can go there. So please, what you are doing is good, but we plead for more trust. We plead for more trust. And to end, Maria was talking about capacity building. For us indigenous people, we think that the capacity building should be for the donors and for the funders, not for indigenous peoples. Because we know our problem and we know what we want. You are the...
Du Congo, dans le bassin du Congo donc, avec le plus grand pays qui renferme les 60% de forêts tropicales. Et je travaille pour le Centre d'appui à la gestion durable de forêts tropicales, qui est l'un des grands partenaires de Tenure Facility. Manifester la solidarité vis-à-vis de ces populations indigènes vulnérables à la base. Et les collègues ont dit ici, en utilisant vos intermédiaires, ils ont leurs intermédiaires. Et finalement, rien n'arrive à la base. Donc, ce que nous voulons, c'est ce que, comme il a déjà si bien dit, ce que Tenure Facility a commencé de faire. Il vient en mission de scoping sur le terrain et identifie qui sont là, qui font quoi, avec qui et pour quel but, au lieu de regardez ces rapports qu'on vous envoie, qui ne sont que des rapports et qui ne disent pas parfois la vérité. Je préfère vraiment que le regard soit plus porté vers la base, vers la base pour renforcer les droits communautaires à la terre, pour les sécuriser. Et nous avons beaucoup d'opportunités dans certains de nos pays, et surtout nous, dans le bassin du Congo, avec la foresterie communautaire. Et déjà avec Tenure Facility, on est à des centaines de 1000 hectares de forêts sécurisées déjà pour les communautés. En RDC, il dit non, nous sommes incapables de vous donner $500 000 parce que vous êtes incapables de les gérer. Mais je dois vous dire que notre petite organisation, avec l'appui de Tenure Facility, a déjà géré plus de 3 millions de dollars pour un exercice de 2 ans. Et l'audit par une maison internationale a été meilleur. Et vous nous dites que nous n'avons pas de capacité. Comment? Donnez-nous les outils de gestion. Et nous allons faire le travail. Allez vérifier à la base si ces communautés ont réellement changé leur mode de vie, changé leurs pratiques pour renforcer la résilience et diminuer l'impact sur les forêts. Et en sécurisant leurs droits. Franchement, c'est ça l'appel. L'appel, c'est que donnez-nous le fonds jusqu'à la base. Et transférez les technologies. Vous avez vos technologies. Nous en avons besoin, nous avons des capacités, nous avons étudié. Certains dans les mêmes écoles que vous. Mais donnez-nous ces technologies, nous allons le mettre en application et on va bien gérer le fonds. Merci.
I'd like for our next interventions from the floor to ask precise questions to the panel. And I see there's lots of hands, but we need to be quite brief. Okay.
Well, thank you. Allowed me to congratulate the organizers of the event and also the panelists. My name is Joseph Olesimel from Kenya, and I have only 2 questions for the panel. Question number 1. It's a Tenure facility. You're doing a great work. I'm wondering whether you have any learning so far in the work you facilitated all over the world, where we have good practices, where the policy is being implemented on the ground, so that other countries, other communities could borrow where the policy have been developed, and there's a good relationship between indigenous people and government, because I think the challenge is, from where I come from, you develop a policy, you agree with the law, but again, to a large extent, the government has a duty and responsibility to ensure the implementation. And one of the recommendations around that is really to build a strong relationship of national institutions and indigenous peoples, so that it becomes easier for implementation of those particular programs or policy on the ground. My second question is that there is a report which indicates that only 2% of donors or foundation go to indigenous peoples. I'm not sure whether this percentage, 2%, is broken down into regions. I'll be happy to know, out of this 2%, how much is going to Africa? Taking into account that Africa contributes less than 3% of the global green gases, but carries the burden of the climate impact. If you see drought, I think the only continent most likely, most communities may not realize the UN Sustainable Development Goals for the remaining 6 years. Reason is the impact of climate change. Drought in, flood in. So either you are experiencing serious drought that completely shattered and destroyed livelihoods, or you are experiencing extreme floods that also do the same, with completely no intervention after those disasters. So indigenous people are struggling on their own resilience. They are struggling on intervention, what we called about adaptation, that undermine resilience and great vulnerability. So there are only communities who are able to come back on their own, but then those mechanisms are being interfered or being undermined by many other stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know we had, maybe, I don't know if Lindsay or others would like to respond to that. And then we had originally invited a representative from the Swedish government here today who could not make it, unfortunately. So we've also asked, after Lindsay, to ask Minnie Degawan to come with an intervention on behalf of the Kawari Fund. Yeah? But I think Lindsay first and then Minnie.
Sure. So I'm not best to speak to that report, but I do know that it assesses by region. I learned it in a Shandia PowerPoint that looks at on the report. Would know for sure. I learned that at the IPAS, the Indigenous Peoples Asian Solidarity Fund launch that happened earlier this week. But I think the point well efficient when we're talking about Indigenous local Afro-descendant communities and the share of the solution that they're advancing. We know how much of climate emissions could come or could be avoided by protecting forests, for instance. That's our focus. And we know that where you have standing forests, you have Indigenous people, local communities, Afro-descendants who have protected those forests for generations.
Thank you. Yeah, okay, Kimaren, very shortly from you.
Yeah, very shortly. Thank you for those inputs, and thank you, Lesimel, for that question. If you look at, for example, the current territorial funding available, which speaks to that question, there is hardly any funding on the rangelands and pastoral rangelands. Yet, in Kenya, for example, 75% is savanna woodlands, grasslands that have the highest carbon compared to 5% tropical forest. And when you look at Glasgow, it was also forests, good and welcome because Indigenous peoples are there. But if the interventions are to save the climate for the people and biodiversity, we need to look at Africa is 45% pastoral rangelands. Where is the rangelands in climate financing? So this is of the landscape of Indigenous peoples and the livelihoods they practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimaren. Minnie, would you like to stand here? Yeah, please. Yeah, or, okay.
Thank you so much. So, Minnie Degawan, Director of the Kawari Fund. The Kawari Fund was really established as a response from many consultations with Indigenous peoples that have raised concerns with regards to the carbon market. We are not promoting the carbon market, but we recognize that it is impacting a lot on Indigenous peoples, and therefore their concerns about the social processes related to producing quality carbon are not being done. What is being focused on too much is the environmental quality, but when Kimaren said we are dying because of recognition, dying by recognition, what is happening is they are checking the box. They did EPIC, they did consultation, but if you go to the communities, they say, we never heard about it. We only heard about it when there was a press release saying that there is an agreement between the government and that they are selling carbon from our territories. So the Kawari Fund aims to strengthen Indigenous people's rights in the carbon market processes, and that allows them to have full discussions, they get full information to make a decision whether they want to or they don't want to participate. But I think it is important that they know what they're saying yes to and what they are saying no to. What makes, I think, the Kawari Fund important is you've talked about bilateral funding, philanthropic funding. The Kawari Fund intends to go to those who are causing all these problems, the companies. And we hope that through a blind trust, they will provide funding, and that funding can then be used to really get the social processes going. And I think the experiences of the different funds are very important learning for us. The Kawari Fund is not Indigenous-led. We have an advisory council with 3 Indigenous peoples, only 3, but we're trying. And so I hope that we can have more coordination so that we, because as Kimaren also said, and I was going to raise my hand on that, the issue of equitable access. I come from a community of mountains with very little forest, and we feel that we're being discriminated against when it comes to climate funding. So I think we need to work more on the issue of equitable access for all the different ecosystems. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Minnie, and thank you for filling a very important gap. Now, there's a woman behind you in the black blouse who's been waiting, and then after you, it's a woman in the colorful shirt, or colorful dress, I should say.
Thank you very much. I'm Diana Pizarro. I'm the Global Coordinator for Indigenous Peoples for the World Bank, and I did not have my feelings hurt. I'm used to it. It's okay. Thank you. No, very excellent panel, excellent event. I've learned so much. Thank you so much. Just a couple questions for the panel. First off, and I really would love to connect on the Karari Fund, but you know, when I'm in other panels and spaces, I'm hearing about all kinds of innovative financing mechanisms, from social bonds, guarantees, you know, the voluntary carbon market, and now there's this plethora of new Indigenous-led funds. That's great news, but how are these funds connecting to different types of more innovative and potentially sustainable financing mechanisms, possibly related to the voluntary carbon market? But I would just like to hear a little bit on that. And then my second sort of small concern is, with a plethora of launching of new funds, how are we all kind of speaking to each other to create a cohesive architecture of contributions? Like you said very beautifully, you know, let's take the logos off the table and think about what are those key 3 to 5 issues, from starting with rights and risk, real risk management, so Indigenous peoples know what they're getting into and how they're potentially going to be affected, and what voice and rights need to be at the table, and also how can their contributions be justly recognized and compensated for, and how can this also actually turn into an opportunity, right? So I'm a little concerned because there's so much going on, but I don't really know how it all is cohesively building towards a common and collective architecture moving forward. And I really liked Kimaren's tokenism of small grants comment. I will definitely be quoting you on that, Kimaren. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Could you just give the mic to the woman behind you, so we'll hear from her first? And thank you for raising that
Thank
question.
you. Hi, my name is Vatsu, and I'm an advocate for Indigenous people and small-scale fisheries. So I'm mainly working in defending the rights of marine PLC and small-scale fisheries. And my question is, I've noticed that when we talk about, I'm working for IUCN actually, when we're talking about a PLC trust fund and access to funding, we are most of the time talking about terrestrial PLC, about land, about forest. So my question to the panelists is, do you think that those funding can benefit small-scale fisheries? Because when we talk about small-scale fisheries, those people are relying on the ocean. And for me, they are the most vulnerable population when we talk about climate change. And what I've noticed is actually that most of the funding are really too much top-down approach. Like what you've said, we need to bring a paradigm change with a bottom-up approach, because the needs of small-scale fisheries is more on access to education, access to health, access to food security, rather than access to biodiversity protection and so on. So that's my question. Like, do you think, since you have experiences about this, why marine PLC are sometimes forgotten when we talk about funding, and how can we support them? And I just wanted to say that this afternoon at the Namibia Pavilion at 3 p.m. B326, we are launching the first ocean fund for a PLC. IUCN is doing it with some organizations, so if you can join us, please come. We will be really happy to learn and listen to your thoughts about it. Thanks.
Thank you. And I'd like to give them, if you could send the mic over to the gentleman over here, and then we'll hear from you, a brief question, and then we'll go back to the panel. I'll start with Nonette, and you get to respond to everything that you've heard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A quick comment and then a question. The first comment is just to congratulate the thinking going behind establishing these creative funds to try to have more impact. I think that from my experience as with the Maya people, but also from a recent dialogue we had with representative of indigenous peoples from all the different regions, it's clear that the approach has to be territorial. It's clear that the approach has to be community, because one, our rights are collective, they are community, they're not individual. And our decision making are in that context as well. And our resilience, our brother Kimaren always talks about the burden that we have been carrying to mediate our life. So on that burden, individual, it's collective. So I just wanted to point out, I think the approach is really clear that this is where we have to go. The question I have is, how do we make sure and communities, and that it does not just become another catchy concept that here in the region.
Thank you.
So how are they speaking to territories and communities?
So, Nonette, we'll start with you. Who's making the cohesive architecture? How can we include fishery or coastal communities? How can we go beyond just a catchy phrase for territorial funds?
I'll be very brief because there are many of us in the panel that can answer to the question. We have trust, as again, I come back to that. The people that we work with, organizations that we work with, they have spaces to discuss this kind of types of assistance. So from my personal experience, they're very informed, they have political capital, they know how to play the national and subnational levels, they know how to discuss these issues and these new funds, and the alliance talk to each other. They're talking to each other. It's not like isolated different pieces. I see them as flower. Different parts, or mycelium, interconnected. So we trust that process, and we can still open spaces for information, like what Kawari was saying. There may be initiatives, and it can be at national, it can be at subnational, it can be location, territory. So thank you, Pablo, for raising the territories and community. So we see them, they're very palpable to us. They're not somewhere. The map tells us where to go, where exactly they gather. So in those places, anyone can go with their topics and their funds, and they know how to do it. Of course, this is ideal. Yeah. There's also the real. The real is there's conversations between them. There's competition, there is. Yeah, there's kind of sometimes conflict, there is, but it gets resolved. They have systems to resolve it. And then second, in the tenure facility, it's been coming to us, the indigenous vision of this interconnectedness, and maybe you can answer that.
Yes, in the last 2 years, we have been involved in Tenure Fund, and of course, our point of view is that for indigenous peoples, we do not separate forests from coastal zone and marine zone. So this is a fund that has been created. It will be housed in the tenure facility, and the idea is that it will really complement the holistic point of view of indigenous people. So yes, we are working on that, and I'm sure we will see more of that in the future. And for indigenous-led funds, we have had at least 3 meetings in the last 5 years, and we have created something that is called the Global Coalition of Indigenous-led funds. And there are more than 30 funds that have already participated in the different meetings that have been convened by IFIP, the International Funders of Indigenous Peoples. So, and the idea is that we share lessons, we coordinate, and we try to define exactly on what teams, what areas, what geographies. And of course, territories and community is the basis of how we are organized as indigenous people. So this is something that is very clear in the Global Coalition of Indigenous-led funds.
I would like to mention that very quickly, and Diana, thank you very much for your questions. I really invite you to read our report and to know us much better, to have a deep dialogues. So also for my brother Pablo, I think so this is one of the challenges for us as indigenous people, local community, So we have our strong organization itself in our homes, and we know who we are. So this is, Shandia is not a fund. Shandia don't have an account. Shandia is bringing together in these ecosystems to be honestly, transparent, trust, love, peace, and all together. I mean, this is something, the collective work that we need to emphasize and work with finances and other different ways. So you're welcome also, brother, to be part of this. And other ecosystems, not just only the tropic. This is a proposal just from the tropic areas from the global context, you know, tropical from Indonesia, Africa, Mesoamerica, Caribbean, Amazon Basin, but also we are discussing with other brothers and sisters in different ecosystems from the Arctics and other more so on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. We only have until 1 o'clock, which is now. There's someone else will be waiting. Yes, I do see your hand, but then you have to pose a question in 10 seconds.
Oh, you saw my hand. I didn't have. You gave me the floor. So, is it me? Yes. So we need to be, in terms of territorial, speaking to the territories and communities, we need to move from co-option of indigenous people to co-designing, co-creation. We need to move from having indigenous people as filler material to having them as active ingredient of this equation of design and delivery of these funds. Thank you.
Okay, I think we'll have to end with those words. I'm sure we could have continued for a long time, but there's another group waiting to take this room. So thank you very much, everyone, for coming. I hope there will be a report coming from Tenure Facility and Tebtebba about this event. Thank you.